before we get into the full review of Together from 2025, I did want to address some of the controversy that's been kind of surrounding this one. So, as of its release, the director Michael Shanks is currently involved in a lawsuit regarding the plot of this movie. Apparently, Dave Franco and Allison Brie were pitched a very similar movie back in 2022, and the writers of that movie are accusing Michael Shanks of stealing the idea. So, with the research that I've done, and as far as I can tell, there hasn't been a definitive conclusion to this lawsuit as to whether or not this is accurate. So, I did go ahead and see the movie, but I just wanted to put that out there as something that happens in the movie industry. I'm not a big, I don't get too deep into this kind of stuff, but it was something that came up on my radar when I was researching upcoming horror movies. So I just wanted to, for the sake of transparency, put that out there. You're welcome to do your own research. And I will keep up to date with any changes in this, and do an update if they come to a verdict, regardless of what it is. But that's just my little disclaimer for this, so we'll get into the review now. So, of course, this is the 2025 release Together, written and directed by Michael Shanks, and it stars Dave Franco and Allison Brie. Years into their relationship, Tim and Millie find themselves at a crossroads as they move to the country. With tensions already flaring, an encounter with an unnatural force threatens to corrupt their lives, their love, and their flesh. This is primarily described as a body horror movie. It also is a romance, I guess, or an exploration of a relationship, which is interesting because Allison Brie and Dave Franco are actually married in real life, which I think adds another pretty interesting layer to this. This movie is predominantly set in the wilderness with some scenes in whatever large city they live in. I don't think it's specifically stated. So, like I said, this one is kind of a romance. It's about a relationship. Um, and so it explores themes of intimacy, codependence, what happens with people who have been together for a long time, themes around like stagnation, corruption, sort of that kind of hodgepodge of things. Talking about the execution, there are some things in the setup to this movie that I didn't really like, but I'll talk more about that in spoilers. What I'll say is that I would have been fine with less of an explanation of the central plot. It really felt as though the movie was built around the central theme, if that makes sense. So you know what the director and writer wanted going into this movie, what they started with, and the rest of the movie feels kind of ad-libbed around that. The performances were really great, especially in the more unhinged parts of the movie. I think in the setup there was some sort of choppy dialogue that kind of took me out of it. But overall, I was really impressed with both Dave Franco and Allison Brie in this one. One thing that was surprising to me was this movie was much funnier than I had anticipated, so that was really a pleasant surprise. The cinematography was fine. I don't think it did anything super unique. I am, to be completely honest, getting a little tired of upside down shots in horror movies. I think it was something that was very effective in the last 5 years, but I'm kind of tired of seeing it. We don't need to go upside down every time there's like a big wide shot or like an overhead shot. I don't know. I feel like it's kind of played out, but let me know what you think in the comments. This movie was genuinely very creepy, probably the most scared I've been in the theater so far this year. And what do I always say? This movie could have been grosser. It was plenty gross. There were some really gross moments, but I could have had that dialed up at least 50%. I could have used maybe, subtract 20 minutes of buildup in the beginning, and then add that 20 minutes of just shocking and nasty imagery. I think that would have really bumped up the score on this one for me. If you are sensitive to jump scares, there's a few pretty good ones in this. I definitely jumped at one point in the movie theater. I think there were also some pretty unique scares in this one as far as body horror goes, some things that I wasn't expecting, and that were done very interestingly. So it definitely got a lot of hit a lot of points for me on scares. Now I will be going into spoilers, so if you don't want to be spoiled for Together, go ahead and see it in theaters and then come back and tell me what you think. When I talked about earlier the story being built around this kind of central idea, I just mean that it's very clear that the director went in with this idea of wanting to show a couple fusing together and kind of had to fill in the gaps as to how and why. Um, and I don't feel like it was necessary. I could have done with less explanation. They really just, it felt forced explaining it. And so the explanation is that essentially it's a cult in the middle of the wilderness who finds this extraterrestrial magical pond that when you drink from it, it begins this kind of fusing process. And so they kind of built this like unity cult around it. And that's cool, I guess. It feels a little cliche, and I think it would have been a stronger story if we didn't have this kind of over explained background. The way that they encounter and drink from the pool is also kind of silly and feels sort of forced. They fall into this like hole, this cave, and immediately sort of resign themselves to be stuck there. They are very calm for how traumatized I feel like I would be personally if I fell into and was subsequently stuck in a cave, in a hole. Um, and Dave Franco, his character immediately drinks out of this strange pond. Their whole plan was to wait out this storm and then crawl out of this cave hole, uh, like the next day, I guess. And so I feel like I personally would rather be thirsty for like 8 hours than drink out of a pond in a random cave. They're very chill about the whole thing, and with the over explanation of why they end up fusing together, again, I just feel like they could have cut some of that explanation, left it a little bit more mysterious, and then just added more gross body horror to the movie. I think that would have made it like a perfect movie for me. Also, on this hike, it was meant to be a day hike, I believe. They didn't pack like camping supplies, but they somehow had a blanket in their backpack. Also, Dave Franco had a bottle of wine in his backpack, which somehow miraculously didn't break when he fell into the hole. I don't know. The whole thing just felt forced and silly to me. So I was feeling a little bit skeptical towards the beginning of this, but once we got into the actual fusing and body horror of it all, I was so excited and I loved the middle portion of this movie. I think the hair in the mouth scene, the fusing together and then cutting themselves apart, all of it was just so fun and wild and again, much funnier than I had anticipated. I could have used so much more of the middle portion because I was having so much fun with it, and I almost kind of forgot about my complaints from the beginning of the movie. And unfortunately, they lost me again at the end of the movie. Um, I have a sort of escalating pet peeve in movies like this where you have this kind of like charismatic, fun, friendly character, right? The neighbor and the other teacher at Allison Bree's school, who, once it's revealed that they are an evil villain, completely change the way that their character speaks and even like the words and the language that they use. So it's revealed that he is somehow connected to this cult and wants to assist them in their fusion. And somehow it's also revealed that uh, a previously missing couple had fused incorrectly and is sort of like Eliza suing under the cave in the hole, and somehow didn't show up in the beginning of the movie. I don't know. This whole cave thing really, really threw me for a loop. You get the very fun scene at the end of the movie where they fully fuse together listening to a Spice Girls record. Um, and that one was fun. I did enjoy that scene a lot. Another horror movie ick that I have that showed up in this movie was when there's unnecessary dream sequences. I think a dream sequence can be very effective, and I like a dream sequence, but when it's connected to the actual horror that is going on. So Dave Franco has two, I think, uh, dream sequences before he drinks from the pond and the actual like together horror starts, and it just kind of feels like adding spooky elements for the sake of spooky elements. I guess it is connected to like the traumatic death of his parents or something. I don't know. It didn't feel necessary. It did. It was effectively spooky though. There's a dream sequence in the beginning about his parents that is very like visually effective and spooky. But I couldn't help but be frustrated with it because it had nothing to do with the rest of like the horror that ensued later. I was also excited to see one of my favorite like urban legends, maybe the king rat. I had a weird like rabbit hole a few years ago looking this up, and I've showed it to a lot of people, and I think it's genuinely just like a very interesting phenomenon that has, I think, happened in real life at least a couple times. Overall, I rated this one 4 stars. It has some cliches in it. It has some weird plotting, some things that I've seen before that just sort of took the score down for me. Overall, I did really enjoy it. I found it spooky. I found it entertaining. I found it funny. It was effective for me. It just won't rise to some of my favorites of the year. But I definitely would watch it again. It feels like a fun kind of like have on in the background, like show a friend. I had told my fiance that this is my new Valentine's Day movie, and so I think I'm gonna have him watch it on Valentine's Day. So that'll be my rewatch, I guess. Let me know your thoughts on Together if you've seen it. I would be interested in hearing all of your inputs, and I appreciate all the engagement and the comments. You all keep me inspired to keep doing this. So look out for my next few reviews, and if you don't already, follow me on Instagram, Letterboxd, and TikTok.